In the spring of 1973, deep inside Hong Kong, within the walls of an unremarkable film studio, Bruce Lee stepped into what would become the final true fight of his life.
This was not a staged performance, not a movie scene, not a demonstration for spectators.
It was a brutal, unguarded confrontation that forced the legend beyond anything the public had ever seen. What unfolded that day was captured on camera, and then sealed away, hidden for more than 50 years. Those who were present understood immediately this wasn't merely a fight. It was a moment powerful enough to reshape how the world would remember Bruce Lee. This is a story that was never meant to surface. A fight that occurred during Bruce Lee's final months, only weeks before his death, against an enigmatic opponent who pushed him to the brink of his physical and philosophical limits. Had the cameras not been recording, this encounter would have vanished into history, forgotten entirely. Some believe it was the experience that changed Bruce Lee forever. Others say it was the moment that exposed both his greatest strength and his deepest vulnerability at the same time. But one fact is undeniable. What took place inside that studio on that heavy spring evening was kept from the world for half a century. The year 1973 appeared to the outside world as the triumphant climax of Bruce Lee's life. Professionally, everything he had fought for was finally aligning. The Way of the Dragon had been completed, cementing his status not just as a martial artist, but as a filmmaker with a distinct creative voice. Enter the Dragon had finished filming, marking the first true collaboration between Hong Kong cinema and Hollywood built entirely around him. For the first time, Bruce Lee was not adjusting himself to the industry. The industry was adjusting to him. International recognition was no longer a possibility. It was inevitable. Studios were calling. Distribution deals were being finalized. Bruce Lee had become a global figure, a symbol of martial arts excellence and cultural transformation. To audiences, he seemed unstoppable, focused, disciplined, and physically flawless. But beneath that polished surface, 1973 was also a year of mounting internal strain. Bruce Lee was pushing himself far beyond sustainable limits.
Those closest to him later recalled that his daily routine had become extreme even by his own standards. He was training upward of 18 hours a day, cycling between strength conditioning, sparring, technical refinement, and philosophical development. At the same time, he was deeply involved in film production, reviewing footage, designing fight choreography, supervising camera angles, and planning future projects. Rest, to Bruce, was not recovery, it was a regression.
Physically, the cost was accumulating. A severe back injury sustained earlier had never fully healed. Chronic pain was now a constant presence. Headaches were becoming more frequent and more intense. His body, honed to its limits, was beginning to show signs of exhaustion that even his discipline could not override. Yet Bruce Lee refused to slow down. Those around him noticed subtle changes. His movements, while still sharp, occasionally carried a stiffness that hadn't been there before. He stretched longer, warmed up more carefully. He spoke less about discomfort and more about efficiency, how to achieve maximum effect with minimal strain. To Bruce, these were not signs of decline, but indicators that adaptation was necessary. Psychologically, the pressure was just as intense. Bruce was no longer proving himself only to critics or skeptics. He was now carrying the weight of expectation from fans, studios, and the global martial arts community. His philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, openly critical of rigid traditional systems, had elevated him in the eyes of some and alienated him from others. Praise was growing louder, but so was resentment. In Hong Kong's traditional martial arts circles, opinions were divided. Many admired Bruce's success. Others viewed his public rejection of classical structures as arrogance. To them, Bruce Lee was no longer just a former student of IP Man who had gone abroad. He had become a symbol of departure. From lineage, from tradition, from the hierarchy that had defined Chinese martial arts for generations.
Bruce was aware of this tension. He rarely addressed it directly, but it informed his thinking. His writings during this period reveal a man intensely focused on validation through testing.
Philosophy to Bruce was meaningless without pressure. Truth had to survive contact. It was during this fragile equilibrium, external success paired with internal crisis, that circumstances began to shift. Preparations were underway at Golden Harvest Studios for future projects. Bruce was immersed in work, managing pain, momentum, and expectation simultaneously, and then quietly, without announcement, someone from his past stepped back into his present. A man who represented everything Bruce had once been trained to become. A man who carried the weight of tradition, challenge, and unresolved history. 1973 had already demanded everything Bruce Lee had to give. What was about to happen would demand even more. Wang Shunliang was not a man who needed introductions within Hong Kong's serious martial arts circles. Though his name rarely appeared in newspapers or film credits, his reputation traveled quietly, carried by those who had tested themselves against him and survived. Among practitioners of Wing Chun, he was known by a title that was spoken with equal parts respect and caution, the King of Talking Hands. The nickname was not poetic, it was literal. Wang's hands spoke for him in combat, delivering rapid, precise strikes that ended confrontations before opponents fully understood what was happening. He had spent decades refining his craft not in demonstrations or tournaments, but in BAMO challenges, unsanctioned, real fights where techniques were stripped of theory and reduced to effectiveness alone. In those encounters, reputations were made and just as often destroyed. By the early 1970s, Wang was in his late 40s. Compact, heavily built, and unassuming in appearance, he did not look like a man who had fought dozens of serious challenges. But those who knew what to look for saw it immediately, the posture of someone grounded, balanced, and perpetually ready. His hands bore the subtle signs of years of wooden dummy training and live combat. His eyes carried a calm that could only come from experience earned through victory. Wang Shunliang was also deeply connected to Bruce Lee's past. Both men had trained under IP Man during their youth in Hong Kong. They shared not only techniques, but lineage, values, and a period of intense formative discipline. In those early days, Bruce Lee had been the smaller, younger student, ambitious and fiercely curious. Wang, older and more seasoned, had been known for pressure testing techniques in real confrontations, something that left a lasting impression on Bruce. But time, distance, and philosophy had created a divide. When Bruce Lee left Hong Kong for the United States, many within the traditional Wing Chun community viewed it with mixed feelings. Some saw opportunity, others saw abandonment. As Bruce's fame grew, so did his willingness to criticize traditional martial arts systems publicly. He referred to rigid styles as limiting, incomplete, even calling them the classical mess. To Bruce, this was philosophical honesty. To others, it sounded like betrayal. The creation of Jeet Kune Do marked a point of no return. Bruce was no longer a student evolving within the system. He was positioning himself beyond it. He spoke of freedom over form, adaptability over preservation. While some quietly agreed, others felt that a line had been crossed. Wang Shunliang said nothing publicly during these years. He continued teaching, training, and fighting privately, maintaining his reputation through action rather than commentary. But when word reached him that Bruce Lee had returned to Hong Kong, now a film star portraying traditional martial artists as inferior, something shifted. This was no longer an abstract debate about philosophy. To Wang, it became a question of honor toward IP Man, toward Wing Chun, and toward the generations who had preserved the system through discipline and sacrifice. In Wang's eyes, Bruce Lee had not simply evolved, he had challenged the foundation itself. And Wang Shunliang was not a man who resolved such matters through letters, interviews, or public statements. He resolved them the old way, directly, privately, in person. So, on an unremarkable morning in 1973, Wang Shunliang made a decision. He would go to Golden Harvest Studios. He would stand before Bruce Lee, not as a former training brother, but as a representative of everything Bruce claimed to have moved beyond. And he would let his hands speak. On a quiet Tuesday morning in 1973, Wang Shunliang walked through the gates of Golden Harvest Studios without prior notice. There was no entourage, no formal challenge delivered in advance, no attempt to draw attention. He wore simple clothing, a plain white shirt and dark trousers, nothing that distinguished him from any other visitor. And yet something about him caused hesitation. Security personnel noticed it immediately. Wang did not move like a tourist or a curious onlooker. His posture was composed, deliberate, and balanced, as though he were fully aware of the space around him. He stood calmly, waiting, giving no explanation beyond a single request. He wanted to see Bruce Lee. There was no aggression in his voice, no urgency, just certainty. Word traveled quickly inside the studio. At that moment, Bruce Lee was reviewing footage from his most recent film project, focused and methodical, analyzing movement frame by frame. When his assistant entered the room, her expression betrayed a tension she struggled to mask. "Sifu Wang Shunliang is here," she said. "He's asking for you." Bruce did not look up immediately. Those closest to him later recalled a subtle tightening of his jaw, a near imperceptible pause, before he responded. He understood the significance of the name. This was not an unexpected visitor in the ordinary sense. This was a confrontation that had been waiting for years. "Where is he?" Bruce asked, his voice even. "Stage 2, she replied. "He's waiting." Bruce stood and removed his jacket without hesitation. "Tell Raymond to clear the sound stage," he said. Then, after a brief moment of consideration, he added, "And tell him to have cameras ready." The assistant hesitated. "Cameras? If this is going to happen," Bruce said quietly, "there needs to be a record." Raymond Chow, head of Golden Harvest, was informed within minutes. He understood immediately that this was no ordinary dispute. The studio began to shift into a controlled lockdown. Stage 2 was cleared. Crew members were asked to step back. Cameras were positioned at multiple angles, not for spectacle, but for documentation. By the time Bruce Lee entered Stage 2, Wang Shunliang was already standing at its center. His hands were clasped behind his back, his stance relaxed yet composed, a textbook image of traditional martial arts discipline. The two men had not seen each other in nearly 15 years, but recognition was instant and absolute. "Soi Long," Wang said, using Bruce's childhood name. His tone was neither warm nor hostile, simply direct. "You've done well for yourself." "Wang Sifu," Bruce replied, offering a slight bow. "It's been a long time." "Too long," Wang said. "Long enough for you to forget where you came from." The words hung in the air. There was no shouting, no raised voices, but the meaning was unmistakable. "I haven't forgotten," Bruce replied. "I've evolved." Wang's expression hardened slightly. "Evolved?" he repeated. "Is that what you call telling the world that what IP Man taught us is obsolete?" "I never said worthless," Bruce answered calmly. "I said incomplete. There is a difference." Wang took a step forward. Without further explanation, he dropped into a flawless Wing Chun stance, precise and grounded. "Then show me," he said. "Show me how your complete system handles the incomplete one." By now, people had begun to gather at the edges of the soundstage. Crew members, martial artists, and actors sensed that something irreversible was unfolding. Raymond Chow watched from the booth, fully aware that what was about to occur would not remain contained to that room, whether it was ever shown or not. This was no longer a meeting, it was a challenge. As the two men faced each other at the center of Stage 2, the atmosphere inside the studio shifted from tension to something deeper and heavier. This was not simply a disagreement between martial artists. It was a collision between past and present, between inheritance and innovation. For Bruce Lee and Wang Shunliang, every movement, every word carried the weight of shared history. Raymond Chow stepped forward, instinctively assuming the role of mediator. He understood the potential consequences, physical, reputational, and historical. "Gentlemen," he said carefully, "if this must happen, we need to establish some ground rules. No rules, Wang replied without hesitation. This is Bamo, challenge fighting the old way.
Bruce met his gaze. Then we need boundaries, he said. No eye strikes, no throat strikes. When someone yields, it ends.
Wang considered this for a brief moment, then nodded. I accept, but understand this, Xulong, I will not yield easily. Neither will I, Bruce replied. Raymond raised his hand, glancing toward the cameras now quietly rolling from 3 separate angles. This is of your own free will, he said. Both of you acknowledge that. Both men nodded. Around the perimeter of the soundstage, witnesses stood in silence. Among them was Danny Nosanto, Bruce Lee's close friend and training partner, who had recently arrived in Hong Kong. He later recalled the unease he felt at that moment. He had seen Bruce spar with champions from boxing, karate, and wrestling, but this was different. Wang Shunliang knew the same techniques, the same principles, the same roots. This was not an external challenge, it was an internal reckoning. Also present was Betty Ting Pei, who had arrived for a script discussion and instead found herself observing a moment charged with unresolved history. Years later, she would describe the air in the room as electric. There was no cheering, no excitement, only anticipation and restraint. Bruce removed his shirt, revealing the lean, disciplined physique that had become iconic worldwide. To most eyes, he appeared in peak condition. But those trained to notice details saw something else. A slight hesitation as he warmed up, a careful adjustment of posture. The lingering effects of his back injury were evident even if unspoken. Wang, by contrast, appeared grounded and methodical. His movements were economical, efficient, free of unnecessary display. This was not a man concerned with image. He was concerned with function. For a brief moment, neither moved. They stood in mirrored variations of the Wing Chun stance, similar yet distinct. Wang's posture was classical, refined through decades of adherence to IP Man's teachings. Bruce's was modified, wider, more mobile, influenced by boxing, fencing, and personal experimentation. In that stillness, decades of shared lineage were being evaluated in silence. Wang saw in Bruce's stance every deviation from tradition. Bruce saw in Wang's posture the embodiment of everything he had questioned. When Wang finally stepped forward, it was not in anger, but in certainty. This confrontation was no longer about accusations or philosophy spoken aloud. It was about a demonstration. Raymond Chow lowered his hand. The challenge had been accepted. The cameras were recording. And Lineage was about to confront philosophy, not in words, but in motion. The moment Raymond Chow's hand dropped, the space between Bruce Lee and Wang Shunliang ceased to be a studio and became something far older and more unforgiving. There was no announcement, no signal beyond mutual understanding. The fight had begun. For nearly 10 seconds, neither man moved. They stood within striking distance, weight balanced, eyes fixed, absorbing information. This pause was not hesitation. It was a calculation. Each was reading subtle cues, breath, posture, tension, processing decades of training in silence. To untrained observers, it may have looked uneventful. To those who understood combat, it was a storm gathering pressure. Wang attacked first. He surged forward with a sudden burst of chain punches, the signature Wing Chun technique, delivered with extraordinary speed and structure. His fists traveled the center line in rapid succession, each strike precise, compact, and relentless. The sound of his hands cutting through the air was sharp, almost mechanical. This was Wing Chun, as it was meant to be applied, direct, aggressive, and overwhelming. Bruce responded instantly, but not conventionally. Rather than meeting the attack head-on with classical deflections, he shifted his upper body with a boxer slip, moving off the center line. As Wang's punches passed, Bruce countered with a low side kick aimed at Wang's lead leg, a technique absent from traditional Wing Chun. The kick landed solidly, disrupting Wang's balance. Wang absorbed the impact and reacted without pause. He trapped Bruce's extended leg and drove forward, attempting a takedown. But Bruce had prepared for this. Years of cross-training with wrestlers and judoka took over. He sprawled backward, maintaining balance, and as Wang committed his weight, Bruce rotated and delivered a short hammer fist to the back of Wang's head. It was not a finishing blow. Both men were still measuring each other, but it marked the first clear exchange. They separated, circling slowly now, breathing slightly heavier, recalculating. "You've learned some things," Wang said quietly, "but can you handle this?" What followed was a demonstration of traditional Wing Chun at its highest level. Wang advanced with sustained forward pressure, unleashing a seamless combination of strikes, elbow attacks, trapping hands, low kicks, each movement flowing naturally into the next. This was not the Wing Chun seen in forms or demonstrations. This was Wing Chun refined through real confrontation. Bruce defended with precision, his familiarity with the system allowing him to read attacks that would have overwhelmed others. But Wang was relentless, driving forward, refusing to give ground. He was proving a point. In the right hands, tradition was not fragile. It was formidable. Then Bruce changed the rhythm. Instead of retreating, he stepped in. He jammed Wang's forward pressure and closed the distance until their arms connected. The fight entered trapping range, and the two men engaged in Chi Sao, not as training but at full combat speed. Hands moved in a blur. For those who understood Wing Chun, the exchange was breathtaking. Each man felt for openings, exploited minute gaps, adjusted instantly to counters. This was sensitivity training pushed to its absolute limit, where reaction time was measured in fractions of a second. It was less like fighting and more like rapid problem-solving under extreme pressure. Dan Inosanto later described this moment as unforgettable. He saw Bruce access the deepest layers of his traditional training. Every hour spent under IP Man, every drill, every lesson Bruce was said to have abandoned. It was all there, fully integrated into Jeet Kune Do. Bruce had not rejected Wing Chun, he had absorbed it. The Chi Sao exchange ended abruptly when Wang broke the pattern with a Phoenix Eye fist, a single knuckle strike aimed at Bruce's solar plexus. Bruce twisted at the last moment, taking the blow to the ribs instead of his center. Pain flashed across his body. He responded instantly. At close range, Bruce delivered his 1-inch punch directly into Wang's chest. The strike was compact, explosive, and perfectly timed. The impact drove Wang backward, lifting his feet briefly from the ground before he stumbled to regain balance. A collective gasp rippled through the room, but Wang Shunlang did not retreat. He charged back in, abandoning pure Wing Chun and adapting mid-fight. Throws borrowed from judo, kicks from northern styles, punches shaped by Western boxing followed in rapid succession. He was making his own statement. Tradition did not mean rigidity. The fight grew more brutal. These were not young men. Bruce was 32. Wang was in his late 40s. Every exchange carried consequences. Bruce's injured back screamed with each movement, though his expression never revealed it. Wang's hands began to swell, the result of repeated impact against bone and muscle. They clinched against the wall, each fighting for leverage. In the struggle, Wang secured a standing arm lock, applying pressure that transferred directly into Bruce's injured back. Bruce's face went pale. For a brief moment, it appeared he might yield. Instead, he relaxed. Using a principle drawn from judo, Bruce yielded to the pressure, creating space. As Wang adjusted his grip to maintain control, Bruce slipped free and drove a knee into Wang's midsection. They broke apart, both visibly exhausted. Blood traced down from Bruce's lip. Wang's eye was beginning to swell. Sweat soaked their bodies under the harsh studio lights. Breathing heavy, they stood facing each other, battered, tested, and still fully present. This was no longer about dominance. It was about survival, adaptation, and truth under pressure, and neither man was finished yet. Raymond Chow stepped forward instinctively, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Enough," he said. "This has gone far enough." For a moment, neither Bruce Lee nor Wang Shunliang acknowledged him. "No," they said at the same time. They looked at each other then, and something shifted. The aggression that had fueled the earlier exchanges was gone. In its place was clarity. This fight was no longer about proving whose system was superior. It had moved beyond philosophy, beyond pride. What remained was Mutual recognition. Two men who understood exactly what the other was capable of. They engaged one final time. The exchange lasted less than half a minute, but it was unlike anything that had come before. There was no wasted motion, no reckless commitment. Every technique was precise, every counter immediate. They moved as if anticipating each other's thoughts, adapting before an attack fully formed. To those watching, it felt less like combat and more like a dialogue spoken through movement. Each man landed clean strikes. Each defended seamlessly. There was no escalation, no attempt to overwhelm. This was not about endurance anymore. It was about understanding. Then, without a word, both stepped back. No signal was given. No rule was invoked. The fight simply ended. Bruce and Wong bowed to each other, a gesture rooted in tradition but charged with new meaning. The soundstage erupted in applause, but the two men seemed barely aware of it. They stood breathing heavily, bloodied, bruised, and yet visibly transformed by what had just occurred. Wong spoke first, his voice low and controlled. "Your Jeet Kune Do," he said, choosing his words carefully. "It's real. It works. I came here to prove you wrong." He paused. "IP Man would have been proud of what you've become." The words carried immense weight. Coming from Wang Shunliang, they were not offered lightly. Bruce's eyes glistened. "And you showed me," he replied, "that traditional martial arts in the hands of a true master are timeless. I never meant to disrespect what we learned. I only wanted to keep it alive by letting it evolve." The tension that had built over years dissolved in that moment. The two men embraced, not as rivals, but as training brothers who had finally closed a long open chapter. What followed surprised many of those present. For nearly an hour, Bruce and Wong sat together on the edge of the soundstage, speaking quietly. They discussed techniques, exchanged insights, and questioned each other's assumptions. Wong asked about the principles behind Jeet Kune Do. Bruce listened intently as Wong recounted experiences from decades of Beimo challenge fighting. There was no audience then, no cameras. Just two martial artists refining understanding through conversation rather than conflict. Raymond Chow observed from a distance. He had seen enough to understand the significance of what had taken place. This was not a spectacle to be marketed. It was something far more delicate. He turned to his head of security. "Seal the footage," he said. "My personal vault. No one sees it without my permission." When questioned, Raymond's response was simple. The world was not ready to see its heroes bleed. Wong's reputation as an undefeated fighter, Bruce's image as an invincible icon, both would be diminished in the public eye by misunderstanding what they had truly accomplished. But inside that room neither man felt diminished. They had been tested honestly, they had adapted, and they had earned each other's respect. That, to both of them, was victory enough. After Bruce Lee and Wang Shunliang departed from the immediate intensity of the soundstage, Raymond Chow took action that would preserve the moment for decades. He ordered the footage, every angle, every exchange, every subtle nuance of their confrontation, to be sealed in his personal vault. He understood the historical weight of what had just occurred. This was more than a fight, it was a revelation of philosophy, lineage, and human skill. Yet he also recognized the delicate balance. The world was not yet ready to see its heroes exposed in raw, unfiltered combat. Bruce Lee died on July 20th, 1973. Just 2 months after this confrontation. The suddenness of his passing shocked the world. Millions mourned a man who had, through film, become larger than life. But for Wang Shunliang, the memory was private and intensely personal. He had witnessed a different Bruce Lee, a man tested at the limits of body and spirit, confronted by someone who knew his deepest techniques. Wang remained silent about the fight, only sharing its lessons privately with his closest students. In his words, "I once fought Bruce Lee. Neither of us won, Neither of us lost, but we both left that room better than when we entered it. The footage remained hidden for decades, untouched and unviewed by the public. Raymond Chow carried the secret with him until his death in 2018, leaving precise instructions for the material to be preserved for posterity. The vault was not to be opened until the world had matured enough to understand what it depicted. Not just the fight itself, but the mutual respect and philosophical significance behind it. It wasn't until 2023, 50 years after Bruce Lee's death, that the footage resurfaced. During a comprehensive digitization of Golden Harvest's archives, film preservationist Dr. Karen Lawo discovered the canister marked with Raymond Chow's personal seal and a handwritten note specifying the exact timing for its release. The discovery sent ripples through martial arts historians, scholars, and enthusiasts worldwide. It posed difficult questions. Should it be shown? Could it alter the public perception of Bruce Lee? Would it overshadow Wang Shunliang's legacy? Consultations followed. The Bruce Lee Foundation was engaged, Wang's surviving family members were contacted, and historians weighed in on the contextual importance of the footage. It was ultimately decided that the material would be released in a controlled manner, with full context provided, the training background, injuries, philosophy, and aftermath, all carefully explained. When the footage finally reached the public, it was transformative. Millions watched as Bruce Lee, the invincible legend of cinema, was tested by someone from his own lineage. Audiences saw him struggle, adapt, and endure. They saw Wang Shunliang not merely as an opponent, but as a master demonstrating that classical martial arts, when wielded by a true practitioner, remained formidable. And they witnessed the extraordinary moment of reconciliation between the two men, when pride was replaced with respect. Comment sections and social media exploded with astonishment and admiration. Fans and martial artists alike commented on Bruce Lee's humanity, a man who, 2 months before his death, pushed himself to the brink physically and mentally, while sustaining injuries, yet remained committed to testing his system honestly. Wang Shunliang, too, received newfound recognition, not as a foil to Bruce Lee, but as a peer who challenged and elevated him. Dan Inosanto, now in his late 80s, reflected on the revelation, "I was there. I saw my friend and teacher tested in ways the world never knew, and I saw him prove that Jeet Kune Do was more than philosophy. It was practical, adaptive, and effective." Dr. Karen Lawo commented on the broader significance. This footage shows Bruce Lee not as a cinematic figure, but as a human being confronting real challenge, discipline, and risk. It bridges philosophy and practice. It validates both evolution and tradition simultaneously. In the end, the story captured in that studio was not about victory or defeat. It was about two masters who honored their lineage, pushed each other to the limits, and emerged transformed. Bruce Lee did not reject tradition, he evolved it. Wang Shunliang did not resist innovation, he proved that mastery is timeless. Together they demonstrated the essence of martial arts, courage to be tested, humility to acknowledge worthy opponents, and wisdom to grow from the experience. For those watching today, the footage is more than historical documentation. It is a masterclass in skill, philosophy, and humanity, a testament to the true legacy of Bruce Lee, Wang Shunliang, and the enduring power of martial arts.